हिंदी में कहावत है कि चांद को दीपक दिखाना, तो प्रभु पिंगाली साहब के लेक्चर पे अगर कुछ कमेंट करना, इट इज़ रियली वेरी डिफिकल्ट टास्क. Friends, it's always very pleasant to listen and discuss the issues related to agriculture development with Professor Prabhu Pingali, the doyen of agricultural economics in the world. I went through your paper, sir, that bumpy road ahead from food to nutrition. It's really, from your presentation and the paper, it really comes out that it's really a bumpy road ahead to transit from food to nutrition security. And moreover, in your introduction, you related that kind of food malnutrition with various other kind of health problems and which are emerging in India. You clearly very showed in your presentation. So one of the messages that, friend, that very clearly comes from Professor Prabhu Pingali's presentation is, until unless we mainstream the policies and programs of different ministries or the departments, it will be really very difficult to transit from food security to nutrition security. So that is a very clear message that I think we should give a thought in our research problems or research programs also. Sometimes, of course, we talk about mainstreaming of climate resilient policies and all those kind of things, but we rarely talk about mainstreaming of the food and nutrition security policies across the different kind of ministries. So first, a couple of observations on your paper. You have very nicely showed the diversity, how it has declined in the Indo-Gangetic plains. And but what has harmed that kind of thing? We are all aware of that kind of problems. It is basically the government policy that did it. It is not that that lands are very fertile and lands are very suitable for cultivation of various kind of crops beyond rice and wheat. It's the pulses and all that. Many of you may be aware that sometime about 30, 45 years back, this Indo-Gangetic plains, the pulses used to be an important crop, but it disappeared because of a number of reasons. It is not the policy of procurement alone, but beyond that, the technological production and all those kind of things. Have we rarely given such kind of attention to these kind of crops in our research? Now, one on that, I agree with you, sir, that if you have to focus on agricultural growth in eastern India, so there is a need for crop neutral kind of policies. And in my presentation in Gurgaon, I showed it very clearly that some of the states, they have their cultivation of pulses, particularly lentil and chickpea in Bihar, they are as remunerative as the competing crops, whether it is wheat or mustards. So we have to look towards those kind of issues. Then, of course, on value chain development, of course, that is the need of the time, but what kind of investment we require. And value chain development, it is not an easy task. It requires different kind of institutional arrangements, and moreover, the convergence among these kind of institutional arrangement. You require banks, financing, you require agribusiness firms, you require research and extension agencies to collaborate on those kind of issues. One of the point, of course, I disagree with you. You say you've shown that smallholders are not responding to the high value crops and all that. My own work clearly is brought out that smallholder farmers are more diversified towards high value crops, particularly the vegetables, because vegetables are labor intensive and smallholder farmers, they have enough endowment of their own family labor to take care of the vegetables. Moreover, another point that is from the smallholders, the smallholders, particularly if you look at the size productivity relationship in different crops, what we find, the size productivity relationship that used to be inverse in case of staples, that has disappeared, largely because of the mechanization of different kind of operations. But that relationship, it still exists in case of high value crops, because many of the operations in high value crops, they cannot be done with machinery, but they require kind of labor and all that. To me, it appears the problem is that of scale for marketing, production and scale of marketing, which is hindering farmers to diversify toward these kind of crops. In one of my papers, we estimated that marketing and transaction costs, if a farmer gets 100 rupees price for a particular kind of commodity, about 20% of it goes at the marketing and transaction costs. So that is too high. So that's the really a requirement of value chain development and this one. Another reason, if you compare the risk, these high value crops, they are very risky in production as well as in market or prices. So how to overcome those kind of risk if we have to ensure the food security, some kind of institutional arrangements or the policies need to be in place. Having some of these observations on Professor Prabhu's, so some of the points that I would like to bring to your notice, of course, many of those who have been working on nutrition security, my colleague Jaya is here. I was just going through a paper. I am not an expert in nutrition security or food security. What was mentioned there that about 80% of the households in India, they still consume less than the ICAR recommended calories intake, about 2200 kilocalories. And the calorie intake, it has been declining continuously since 93-94, and the malnutrition persists. Despite rapid increases in food production, particularly of rice and wheat, and the milk, which we call it as a complete food. India is the largest producer of milk, about 155 million tons or so. So despite these kind of things, high rates of undernutrition, this persists. And another point, of course, Amrinder Kumar, he spoke something on the PDS and all that. There has been a significant outreach of the PDS system in the country. And the other kind of course, the food transfer schemes like midday meal and all that. But have we been able to achieve the nutrition security? Perhaps I think the rice and wheat cannot provide an adequate nutrition security to country. And another 2 or 3 things, because this is important for the policy makers. If you look at our consumption of rice and wheat, it has been, you can say, almost stagnant for the last 20-25 years or so. So that means the demand for these staple foods, it's unlikely to increase much. Per capita consumption is unlikely. So we have to definitely give thought to the other crops. And moreover, these staples, they are not a source of nutrition as compared to the coarse cereals and other high value crops. Now, why we are stuck up in this kind of rice wheat syndrome? Of course, our MSP and assured procurement, they are one of the reasons, but there are some other reasons also. Say, because the policies for ensuring food security that were developed during, say, 60s or 70s and so, they are still continuing with those kind of policies, and the farmers also invested in their farm, in terms of machinery or etc. accordingly. So these have become what sort of the investment the farmer has made, it has become asset specific. This cannot be used for other crops. If you want, say, okay, combine harvester for wheat, which farmer has invested a lot for vegetables, it is unlikely to work. So we have to think of this kind of. Another, of course, the region, particularly in the Indo-Gangetic plains in Punjab and Haryana, the government, of course, have been emphasizing on the diversification of the cropping pattern towards high-value crops, but we are still stuck in that. Farmers are not diversifying apart from the policy issues. One of the major issues is the availability of the labor. Because all these high-value crops, they require labor. They are labor-intensive, and these states are scarce in labor, and the wage rates are very high. Then apart from, of course, that risk, as I said, that very high production and post-harvest losses in high-value crops. And today, somebody sent me that about the cold chains. So the capacity that we have today to store the perishable commodity, it is just 40% of what is required. So you require a lot of investment for the cold chains for these kind of things. Then, as I was talking about the risk, this paddy and wheat, they are very less risky crops, whether you talk about the production side or you talk about the market sides. Markets are assured, production risks are also not high. And because of these kind of things, as I said, the pulses and coarse cereals, particularly in Punjab, Haryana, they have disappeared. So we require some kind of, as you rightly said, the crop neutral, I will say not a crop neutral policy, but a policy that encourages the coarse cereals, the pulses, and the vegetables and fruits in those kind of things. And moreover, particularly on the research is very important. But to talk about, see, on chickpea, Helicobacter is a deadly insect. It is a polyphagous insect. And despite a long time efforts, we have not been able to control this menace on these crops. Another, the menace is that is the wilt in case of chickpea, which are not controllable till date. Now, on coarse cereals, of course, you have very rightly highlighted, particularly the pearl millet or sorghum, etc. They are very rich in nutrients. Their per capita consumption is declining. But where it is going? It's going as an animal feed. That means some of the nutrients, we are getting it indirectly through the food chain that is made available to human beings. Then, of course, from your presentation, one of the points that is clearly there is considerable diversity in production as well in the consumption patterns. And to me, it seems that our PDS system has highly distorted the consumption patterns. Because I remember when I was a graduate student, undergraduate students, at that time we went to Hyderabad for a student trip. And the evening I am from north, so evening we were looking for some dhaba or hotel where we can get chapatis. We went around about in a circle of 3 kilometers or so, we didn't get it. But now if you go to even Chennai or anywhere, you will get chapatis and everything at the roadside dhabas and all those kind of things. In PDS, of course, if you see that, of course, the wheat is not still a preferred commodity in southern states, but there is a huge amount of this one quantity, it goes through the PDS to these states, where it is going. But that is again a very important, it all goes to the bakeries. Now, then, of course, one interesting thing that, of course, from the nutrition security point of view, some time back, my colleague from ICAR, Parthasarathy Rao and myself, we did what is happening to the consumption of pearl millet and sorghum, where they are being grown. And what we observed very interesting, the regions where these are grown, their consumption rates are also very high as compared to other regions. And what I find is that these two, they contribute to about 15 to 35% to the calories intake, about 45% to the protein intake in those regions, and 20 to 60% to iron, and 20 to 45% of the zinc intake. These two crops, where these are grown and being consumed, especially in the rural areas. So for PDS, it's really, we have to think how to include these grains in the PDS system, the procurement and distribution. And moreover, unit cost of getting nutrients from these sources is much less as compared to that of paddy and wheat and other high-value crops also. Then, of course, when we talk about the coarse cereals that are very nutrient-dense kind of crops, there has been rarely a technological breakthrough, particularly in terms of improving the quality. Because when the pearl millet atta, it is cannot be kneaded easily. And today's young educated women, they don't know how to knead that atta. And moreover, they provide good taste when they are cooked on a chula, fuel wood kind of chula. But if you get on gas stoves, etc., you don't get the same kind of taste and all that. And the young generation is averse to these kind of things. So it's really important that the research should emphasize on improving the quality of these kind of cereals. Then, likewise in pulses also, there is little breakthrough. As I mentioned, there is a considerable scope in some of the states like Bihar, chickpea and lentil. And then, of course, the biofortification. which is also in need of the time today. Of course, we should emphasize whether it's about rice or wheat and all that, and even in vegetables, the IRI, Indian Agriculture Research, it has come out some varieties, I think, of cauliflower, iron fortified varieties. So we can, and or of course the pigeon pea. So then one important point is that soybean. We produce huge quantities of soybean, a nutrient-rich crop, but we don't consume it. Most of the, about 5 million tons of soya cake we export every year on an average. So why don't we give some consideration of those kind of products to include in our diet so that the nutrition status of the country improves. Then, of course, finally, on the livestock, it has considerable potential to impact a household nutrition status, especially of the children, who are the building blocks of a healthy society. But how it works, the influence of this is via the family member who controls the income generated from the livestock. And my colleague Jaya Jumrani, she is doing PhD with JV Meenakshi in D School. We did a paper particularly looking on those kind of issues, livestock, women and child nutrition. And we found that where the women have a greater access to the livestock-based income, their children are more nutritionally secure as compared to others. And in case of livestock, the added advantage is, unlike land, the livestock assets are not bounded by any property rights, and the women can easily own and use the income from these for improving the household security. Thank you.